In terms of being the definitive Deltic, I think Accurascale have every right to make that claim. This is nearly perfect. A big hello to you. I hope I find you well. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you up here to the loft on Weir Yard. And today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new Accurascale Class 55 Deltic locomotive. It's certainly been quite a while coming and we've really been looking forward to this. And certainly the Deltic is a prototype that really does have a loyal following, both in model form and in the prototype world. Named after its rather unique engine design built by Napier for the English electric locomotives. These have a triangular shaped engine, and if you can imagine, 3 tubes with a crankshaft at each of the points of the triangle and the tubes making each of the sides. Each of those tubes has a double pair of pistons which work against each other, so uniquely no cylinder heads in this engine at all. And this made for a very unique exhaust noise and really the sound of power. These locomotives really did look and sound like they meant business. They replaced nearly double the number of steam locomotives and had incredible reliability and availability compared to the steam locomotives that they replaced, not least because the engines were designed to be just taken out and overhauled away from the locomotive with a pool of spare engines allowing for a very quick turnaround in works. 22 of these locomotives were built, and I believe that the Western region also considered placing an order for their own fleet of Deltics, but in the end were dissuaded from going down that route, and certainly it would have been quite interesting had there been a fleet, say, double the size of what we actually got. The Accurascale model comes on the heels of a number of different manufacturers trying their luck at the Deltic, but all of them have left us somewhat lacking, and it's been something that the market has been wide open for somebody to take on the Deltic and really make the definitive model. Now, Accurascale did make the claim that this was going to be the definitive 00 gauge model, and those are kind of big words, them's fighting talk, and today we're going to see, did Accurascale come through and meet that promise with the definitive Class 55 Deltic. Come with me in association with Trainer-Matic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, with the full range available to view and buy at their UK stockists at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support for this video comes in association with TMC, the Model Centre, for the largest stocked online store of new, old, and custom weathered and renumbered stock. Check them out at themodelcentre.com today for their full and comprehensively listed website. So as you can probably tell, I am really excited because the Deltic is one of my favourite model diesel locomotives, and certainly going right back to when I was quite young and when D9012 Crapello turned up from Hornby 00 in my collection in its really quite eye-catching two-tone green. I've really had a fondness for this particular class of locomotives. So come with me and let's see how Accurascale did. There aren't many diesel classes that can be said to have a following as big as the steam locomotives that they were set to replace, but the Class 55 Deltic must surely be one of those that does. We've been waiting really with some earnestness for the Accurascale Class 55 to appear. When it was announced, it was intended to be the definitive model of the Deltic. Of course, Such an iconic locomotive as this has had outings before with a number of different manufacturers, and we can trace that all the way back to Hornby 00 in the 1960s, although that model suffered from a great many faults, including being vastly undernourished in terms of length. And in fact, Hornby 00 jumped the gun and released the model in all over plain BR green, assuming that that was what the real locomotives would be released to traffic in. And actually they weren't. When they did turn up, they were in the iconic two-tone green with the white cab surrounds. Later on, they gained half yellow front ends and then full yellow front ends, rail blue. Finsbury Park allocated locomotives got white cab surrounds as they reached towards the end of their assignment from that depot before being transferred to York, where they again lost the white window surrounds, and indeed one in preservation even managed to get Porterbrook purple. And an awful lot of these different liveries have been forthcoming from Accurascale, but I'm particularly grateful to Accurascale for sending over for review a Tops BR Blue version, and you can see here I've got a catalogue number ACC-2161-DCC number 55011, the Royal Northumberland Fusiliers. Now, whilst I really do like the Tops liveried blue locomotives, it has to be said that the Deltic does very much suit the iconic two-tone green livery that they were turned out into traffic originally with. And my childhood memories included having a model of D9012 Crapello as part of the Hornby 00 range, and I always thought that that was quite an iconic locomotive, even after I learnt of its many shortcomings. We've been waiting for quite some time for this, it has to be said, and with COVID, delays have come. But I've been on record as saying that the predecessor to this from another manufacturer has always disappointed me a little bit. And I'm not one for putting my models on the carpet and trash talking them, but the Bachmann model just left me feeling that there was something missing, and I could never quite put my finger on it. So I'm really excited to be able to take a look at this all new Class 55 that has come with the promise of being the definitive 00 Class 55 Deltic locomotive, and we're going to see today, does this really live up to that claim? The first thing that greets you as you open the box are all these head codes, and these are so that on the head code fitted models you can change what it says. And these are printed on some pretty high quality paper, and it's actually not only sticky backed, but you can see there they're die cut too, to make it absolutely easy to take the ones you want and fit to the model. Of course, it has to be said that this particular model is domino head code fitted with plated over head code boxes, so none of these are going to be able to be fitted, but it's a really, really nice touch. And whilst we've seen some degree of customization with some locomotives from some manufacturers, this is the first time I've seen such a comprehensive list. And if you're wondering which head code will work for you, Accurascale's also very handily put in this this kind of deciphering tool. We've got two sheets here which tell you what they all mean, and otherwise they would just be this nonsensical code to an awful lot of modelers. So it's really interesting and nice touch. Another nice touch is this booklet, which is very reminiscent of, I can remember my father's collection of commercial motors from the early 1960s, and this is in exactly the same style of industry brochures and trade magazines of the day, and I just love this style. And in it even we've got some of these period advertisements for various bits and pieces, and I've got to show you this, even the font and the justification of the text is it's like reading something that was made back when the Deltics were brand new. Now this just gives some kind of reminiscences from the point of view of two particular individuals on the Deltics themselves, and it's a really nice touch, although it doesn't give you a huge amount about the history. And we've got the Napier Deltic engine here, and there's some beautiful line drawings, and it has to be said, I just love this, really do. We've got the Swan Song of the Deltics, again, an impression of the time. This is taken from the Railway Magazine's Locomotive Practice and Performance series in June 1979. And it's really interesting to read it from the point of view of somebody who was there before the Deltics were being withdrawn, but it was only a matter of time. We've also got at the back just a little bit of information for analog and digital functions, and we're going to deal with this in the review a little bit later on. But if you've got the DC model, you will still need to gain access quite easily, it must be said on this model, to the DCC socket, because the blanking plate has some little switches on that allow you to turn things like tail lights on and off, which is really useful. So all the information that you need is here. And then if you're lucky enough to have the full DCC sound fitted version, the final page of this lovely little booklet includes all of the different function numbers and what they actually do for the sounds, plus the lighting functions. Now, if you're going to DCC fit the model yourself, you're going to need a 6-function decoder to be able to access all of the different lighting functions. One thing I will say at this point, though, is that like a lot of people, I use the NCE power cab, and I can only go up to F28 on this particular handset, whereas we've got an F29 and an F30. So just be prepared that depending on your DCC system, you may not be able to access these last few functions. I don't know how it is for other systems, but certainly on the NCE, you're just not going to be able to use those. We've also got the more familiar paperwork here, just a little bit of information with the guarantee, do's and don'ts, and then we've got here this beautiful exploded drawing of all of the parts, and just kind of giving you an idea of how they all fit together, plus a listing there should you need any spare parts. And I'm a big fan of these because I know a lot of people do moan about the price of models, but when you see this, somebody's had to hand assemble all of this, and it just goes to show that you get a lot for your money. And certainly I wouldn't want to put that together from a kit of parts. As we delve deeper into the box, we've also got the buffer beam detailing. You can do 1 or 2 of the buffer beams here. All the representative pipework for things like vacuum brakes, steam heat, electric train heat, air brakes, front couplings, all that kind of stuff is all here. And they're already finished as well. They're not just plain black plastic. We've got all the connectors correctly finished in the appropriate colours, which is really, really nice. We also have some etched nameplates. Now I'm going to just take these out of the packet because it's a lot easier for me to show you these. So these are for the locomotive that you'll buy. So obviously if you get one of the other ones, it will have the different name. So we've got here etched nameplates for the Royal Northumberland Fusiliers. Really, really nicely done there with that typical red background and the kind of almost aluminium looking letters and surround. You can also see that red paint has a kind of little bit of a texture to it, as if it's painted onto a casting. But if you're not feeling comfortable fitting those, the model does have the printed nameplates on the side. So if you were using something like PVA very, very sparingly, you can use the printed nameplates as a guide for where you would put the etched ones, which is really quite useful. There's a lot of packaging in these boxes. Now, I have read online from a few people who've said that they've had a few issues with models arriving with detail loose in the packaging. So I'm going to be quite careful and gentle here, just getting it out for the first time, just making sure that it has survived its transit. And one of the other things as well that I noticed is that this is incredibly heavy, really, really heavy. So much so that when the big outer box with all of the paper packaging that it came with the courier with came, I honestly thought that Accurascale had sent a handy brick as well, you know, just so you could check out its haulage capabilities. But actually, no, they hadn't. All the weight was the locomotive itself. So just a quick check there. No loose detail in the box. That's always a good sign. And the model itself here, really, really heavy. I just can't express just how much weight in such a small space there really feels to be. And initial impressions here are very, very good. And what's really caught my eye is all of this pipework detail just above the fuel tanks, individually picked out, all the details there, all the appropriate colours, and that makes a huge, huge difference. And I'm going to show you what I mean. I don't like to make a habit of bringing in other manufacturers' models into a review, but this is the Bachmann Deltic, and you can see there, whilst it does have a sort of representation of that detail, none of it is picked out. So we've already got a massive improvement. And I wouldn't have believed, actually, if you just said, oh yeah, these pipes are just picked out, I'd have thought, yeah, that's nice. But the difference that that makes is incredible. The fuel gauge as well, look at the quality of the printing on it. It actually looks like a real gauge. And I think there's probably a few of you now shouting at the screen that that's what it's supposed to look like. But this is a model, quite a small model. What you're seeing on your screen is actually several times the size of the model there. It's quite enlarged, and yet you can still see the detail. It looks like a real fuel gauge. We've also got all of this extra markings across here. And there you can also see that printed nameplate, the Royal Northumberland Fusiliers. I think that's actually quite credible. And one of the other things as well, I'm just noticing there, look at the engine room. I have to say that when I read that it was going to have, amongst the other lighting functions, engine room lights, I thought, well, why would you want engine room lights? Because all it's going to do is highlight all the gubbins, the electronics inside. But that's actually a model of the engine. Look, you can just see there, Napier, written on the engine. So clearly there's some kind of structure inside this. Again, yeah, you can see Napier Deltic written on the other engine. So there is actually a fully modelled interior there. So these windows actually do give you a good view into that. And that is actually really nice. Looking here, we've got a really nice sharp 55011 and the tops panel. You can see here this locomotive represents one that is allocated to York. And then we've got these chains. These are prototypical. The locomotives really did have these, and do have these. And that's real chain. And that is an interesting touch. I've never ever seen that done in model form before, it must be said. And just to go back to this model, no chain. We do have the recess where it would go, but it's not there. And also the bottom of the bogie here, you see this this bar. It's much chunkier and thicker on that than it is on here. You can see the difference in the bogies, but I don't do trash talk of locomotives as a rule, so I'm going to put that one away. It must be remembered there's probably about 20 years separating the two models, so let's give it a little bit of credit. In the cab, it's a bit difficult to see, but I have seen from Accurascale that the dials actually light up, and we're going to go looking for that a little bit later on. But we've got that perfect shape, and that very front bit of the window plated over correctly, but we've got the perfect, and actually quite difficult to get right, shape of the body side. And you can see that that curving in is correctly followed by the door, the body side, the grills. Everything is right. These doors too, They really do look perfect, and the rails there, the grab rails, the door handle, you could imagine a real person climbing up and using that door. It looks like it could open. It doesn't, but it looks good enough to do the job. Now, going back to these bogies, another point that I would like to show you, you see there the steps on the side. They're actually like a wire mesh, again, just like the prototype. And that is something that, I'll be honest, I'm really quite impressed with. You know, easily pleased, but it's little touches like that that really bring this model alive. We get a fully detailed underside of the fuel tanks, all the pipe work there, and the bogies too. Now, I did notice that the brake shoes don't line up with the wheel treads, but it does look like they've left more than enough room for you to be able to very easily swap these wheels out for EM or P4 wheel sets, or indeed just pull these out to the appropriate gauge. And it strikes me that the brake blocks are probably set up to be the correct scale distance apart. Now, it must be remembered that 00 locomotives are running on HO track, which makes them slightly narrow gauge. So the brake blocks are probably in the right place, and the wheels are slightly narrower due to it being 00. The roof fence, the louvres on there do look good. You can see the suggestion of a structure behind, just like you would see on the original locomotives. Really, really nice. Now, of course, the front face is really important, and on this, it is captured really, really well. It's a very complex shape with a lot of curves curving in many different directions. And we've got these sort of almost like, it just makes me think of flying goggles for some reason. These quite small angled front windscreens, really nicely done, separately applied windscreen wipers. And let's go looking for the demarcation between the blue and the yellow. This is an area that can sometimes not quite be right. There is a slight bleed between the blue and yellow, but this is something, I'll be honest, you do see on a lot of locomotives, and that's nowhere near as bad as I've ever seen on any others. And again, this is really, really enlarged. It's quite a cruel enlargement. Although one thing it does show up is you can just see at the bottom there, there's kind of a little chip in the paint. Now this tiny little access ladder is glued on there, so that chip has happened at some point during the production process, probably when the body was resting on something and the paint's just sort of stuck and peeled off as it's been lifted off. But again, you wouldn't notice that unless you're really, really zooming in. Buffers are sprung, as you would expect. And again, this is an area where I was just always a little bit disappointed on the previous model that I've got from another manufacturer, and these are pushing all the buttons for me, the good buttons. And some of that other detail on the front, the marker lights there, really do look good. We've got all the separately applied handrails, and we've got a representation there, pipe on the buffer beam just behind that kind of cowling area. Although we've got a little bit of print over, you could just see how the pipe work is painted in that grey-white, but it's just slightly gone over onto the black and given that almost like a halo effect. Again, it's not a big issue. It's not something that's going to show up easily under normal viewing angles, so I wouldn't get too worried about it. The roof fans really are sublime. You can see it's got the prototypically quite slender, actually, fan blades in there. And the mesh over the top is looks to be a metal mesh, really nicely done. And then we've even got that checker plate right on the very top above the fan spindle or motor. The exhaust ports, can't actually see the bottom on those, which is nice. You're not supposed to. But certainly with some models, they go down and then are blanked off, and you can actually see the blanking off. You don't get that on this. It really does look like a hole into the bowels of the locomotive, and I do like it. We've got the rest of the riveting detail, the roof panels, everything is where it should be. And we've got those access hatches for the front nose equipment, a pair of horns, again separately applied. And just at this angle, actually, you can see those separate etched windscreen wipers. We've got the lamp brackets. There's one down there, just got a little bit of its gangster lean on, but again, not really too worried by that. The rendition of the blue does look right to me. And all in all, the detail on here, the more we look, the more it is giving. I like the riveting just underneath the door there. And you can see the Speedo linkage to the axle box. And there's a great deal of depth to these bogie sides. You've got the primary and secondary springs, and they don't look like they're all just moulded in a line in one piece. There's a real depth. The secondary suspension behind there looks further back, deeper into the bogie than this primary suspension on the front. It is all plastic moulded, but actually you wouldn't really look at it and go, oh, it's just a one-piece plastic moulding. They've really got it right. And actually the finish on this as well, that more towards the matte end, there's no shine off this plastic, and I do like it. In terms of drive, we've got all-wheel drive to both bogies, and then we've got a slimline tension lock coupling in a sprung-loaded self-centering mechanism, just like you would get on the coaches. And this is quite a long locomotive. We don't have any malnourished length on this at all, so that is going to be necessary. I think it recommends radius 3 minimum, and I don't think, you know, they're not having a laugh on that. This is a long locomotive, and just to put it into context, there is the A-class from the same stable that we reviewed a little while back. It does look quite tiny by comparison. When it comes to the Dcc Fitting, though, it does share some of the innovations that the A-class had as well. To gain access to this, you don't need any specific tools. You just grasp hold of this roof hatch and just lift it off. It's held in place by a pair of tiny neodymium magnets, so it does have a positive fit into there. It's not going to just fall out if you turn the locomotive upside down, and that is a very similar idea to how the A-class has a full removable roof, and it's just nice that they've carried this over, because it does make Dcc fitting so much easier. The locomotive comes with an inbuilt stay alive, so you don't need to bother with any of that. And if you go for the sound fitted option, we've also got a pretty beefy speaker in here, which I can just about show you. It's just fitted here underneath these two grills, which are allowing the sound out quite nicely. The decoder's already in this. It has the ESU lock sound, but you can see the access to the 21-pin header is really easy. And if you've got the DC model, then what you will have here is a blanking plate with some switches, and that allows you access to turn some of the lighting functions on and off on DC. So again, it's really helpful to know how to get into here. As I said in the introduction, you're going to need a 6-function decoder in order to access all the different lighting functions. This does have front and rear lights. It also has front and rear cab lights, and then we've also got the engine room lights, and depending on whether you've got the modern YPAC version, we've also got shunting lights and some lighting functions to do with them as well. We're going to put the headlights on, and you can see there they light up, change of direction, they go to the other end. You can just see in there those gauge lights coming on and off. That is really nice. It's very difficult to see inside the cab, but they are definitely there. And I was a bit skeptical when I first heard that it was going to have this, but they do show up, and they do actually add something. Looking to the other lighting functions. Now, another thing that I really like about these is they are set up to be directional, which is a great help. So let's try the marker lights. These are on F11. So I've turned them on, But of course, you're not going to see them until I change the locomotive's direction. And you can see them up there. Really, quite dim. But that's how the real ones would have been. There they are on. And there they are off. Now, again, cab lights are also directional. So I'm going to just change the direction so that this is the lead cab. And these are on function number 12. So let's just turn those on. And that actually does show up the interior really well. It's something that I really struggled in the rest of the review to actually see the interior of the cab. But these cab lights really do make a great difference. And because they're directional, if we change the direction, you'll see that the cab lights at the other end are coming on and off. The next lighting function we're going to be taking a look at is the engine room lights. Now these are up on F25. So currently engine room lights are off, engine room lights on. And again, that really does show up that Napier Deltic just in there really nicely. So there's some really great lighting functions on this. If you've got the YPAC version, you've also got additional lighting functions on F22 for night lights on and off, again directional, and F23 for yard work lights, again directional. The use of directional lights really does help a huge amount because it means you're not then messing about and ending up with the risk of having marker lights front and rear showing on both ends at the same time. All in all, I'm really impressed with this. The glazing too, it looks and actually feels flush. I'm not sure how they've done it, but whatever they've done, it works and it looks good. We don't get that prismatic effect in any of these windows. And once we get the cab lights on, we'll take a look inside the cabs and just see how well we can see those light up instruments. Now, if you're wondering about access inside, Accurascale do warn that there is a lot of fiddly detail and you might want to minimize the number of times you take the body off. So I've not taken the body off, but what I have done is I've asked a good friend of mine, John JMC, to allow me to use a photograph that he took. So we've got that up on screen and you can see there that there is a surprisingly good amount of space inside. So whatever you want to fit in there, you can do. I mean, maybe you want to put a brick in there, I don't know. But certainly you're not going to be pushed for space. And certainly given that this model features that very innovative factory fitted stay alive, it really couldn't be easier. So we moved over to the layout, and as you can see and probably hear as well, I've removed my lapel mic and I've put it on the layout, and this is so that you can get the best effect from the locomotive and judge just how this sound suite sounds. So we're going to be looking at the function list as in the back of that pamphlet, and I'm going to be using my NCE power cab to be able to access this. So first of all, we're pressing F1 to start her up, and then I'm going to run through the different sound functions. I particularly like the train announcements, and you can change some of the stations being announced using CV numbers, I believe, but as default you heard the default settings, and I think that that is a great touch, something that I've seen on US outline locomotives, but I think that this is one of the first to appear in the UK, and certainly it's something that really does add an extra dimension to running this locomotive. When it came to running, this model really had no problems whatsoever. I initially tried it on a rake of BR Blue-Grey Mark 1s, and it handled these with incredible ease, a prototypical length train, which actually would be beyond the means of many modelers in terms of space, unless you had quite a large sizable layout such as Weir Yard. I then tried to tax the locomotive by adding extra coaches on, and I got up to 32, and quite frankly, this locomotive really didn't seem to be bothered by the presence of that many locomotives on its drawbar, just romping round without even any signs of wheel slip or hesitation. In fact, the only thing that stopped me from putting additional coaches on was that, quite frankly, those Mark 1 coaches I was using at the front of the train couldn't handle the weight behind them, and as the train went round corners, it was pulling the bogies off the track, but the locomotive itself remained sure-footed. Quite frankly, it will pull far more models than is practical to put behind it on a model layout, and far more than the prototype was ever tasked to pull. The sound suite is really nice. The only thing that really I could fault was that at a particular frequency there was a slight crackle on the speaker, almost like we were hitting resonance or something, but really I feel like I'm looking for things to complain about, because really there just wasn't anything wrong with this model. In terms of being the definitive Deltic, I think Accurascale have every right to make that claim, and I cannot see this model being improved anytime soon. It simply has all the features that you could have wanted, and a lot more that you didn't know that you wanted too. In terms of price as well, it's bucked the trend. £160 for the DC Ready version really is a great price for any locomotive of this type in this day and age, but for one as high-spec as this, it truly is superb. At £250 you can have the all bells and whistles sound-fitted version, and certainly that is well worth the money. I really like the fact that this comes factory fitted with the Stay Alive. That does make a big difference, and certainly it shows in performance, and when I took the locomotive off the track you could see that that Stay Alive was really earning its keep. Some of the other features hidden away in the ESU lock sound decoder include the ABC shuttle, although you'll have to go and have a look online to find how to set that up, but trust me, it is in there, and certainly there are far more features in this, and if there's any criticism, it's that perhaps Accurascale don't quite blow their own trumpet enough when it's deservedly so, and a few extra bits and pieces on how to use functions such as the ABC shuttle would be quite handy for the average modeler who might make some good use of that. All in all, this is a great model, and I've had none of the problems that some people warned us about online about detail being a little bit fragile. You can see, if I grab hold of it and give it a really vigorous shake, and I don't recommend doing this with your model, but nothing has come off. Everything has stayed put. It's taken all of the handling that I've given it, and it really hasn't had any problems whatsoever. When we come to the scores, first up is build quality, and as I've said, despite my rough handling, and believe me, I tried to dislodge some of that detail towards the end of the review, just to see whether there was anything in some of the comments I'd seen online about loose chains and loose detail, but I could not replicate that, and really the locomotive passed the shake test with flying colours. Everything was where it should be. I didn't have any problems whatsoever, so it gets a 10 out of 10. On running quality, this really could pull a house down, and certainly if you load a train up with bricks, it will pull them too, as Accurascale have shown. When I tasked it with 32 coaches, it didn't even break a sweat. It was actually the coaches that couldn't handle it, not the locomotive. So I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. On Dcc Fitting and Innovation, I really like the factory fitted Stay Alive. That is a great feature, as is the removable roof panel to gain access to that decoder. It certainly makes all the difference and leaves you wondering why other manufacturers can't do this. I also like the fact that we've got that fully visible interior through the engine room windows. It just works, and it hides all the electronics inside really, really well. If I have to find something to go against this model, and I do feel like I'm trying far too hard at this, it was that at certain frequencies there was a little bit of a crackle from the speaker, but as the engine revved up, that disappeared, and it just felt like we were getting a resonance frequency in there, and possibly the sound was turned up from the factory just slightly too high, but that would be an easy remedy. So I'm going to give this a 9.9. When it comes to accuracy and quality of finish, on accuracy it's 100%. There is nothing that I can find to fault on this model. It really is great. On the quality of finish too, it is superb, and I particularly like all that pipework detail above the fuel tanks. It does give it so much more credibility than I would have thought it would, but seeing it in the flesh, it really does take this model head and shoulders above the competition. For me though, there was a tiniest little chip on the yellow front end, and from its positioning, with a detail part glued over the top, it's clear it's something that's happened during production. It really is minor. In the pictures you saw on your screen, that's some quite severe magnification, so most people really wouldn't see that. There was also very, very minor fuzziness on the yellow front ends where it met the blue. Again, only really visible with some quite unsympathetic magnification, so I'm going to give this a 9.8. On value for money, this locomotive really does give you a bang for your buck. At £160 RRP for the DCC Ready version, this locomotive really is something special, and at a price that we're not seeing from a number of the other manufacturers. For a sound-fitted version, £250 is the RRP, and that certainly gives you a very special installation. So all in all, there is nothing I can fault here, and I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. And that gives us a final score of 49.7. This is nearly perfect, and I think Accurascale are well within their rights to describe this as the definitive Class 55 Deltic model in 00. All the models are pretty much sold out. I've hunted high and low to try and find somewhere that still has these in stock, and at the time of filming I really have failed. It's safe to say that these have been some of the most successful models to hit the market, and that RRP probably has a lot to do with that, along with the fully spec'd lineup. And these locomotives always were popular in real life, so model form, it always was going to be something that would sell out well to enthusiasts. Accurascale though, recognising that so many people may have missed out, and a lot of people who did manage to get one or two of these may well be wanting more, are proud to announce that they are going to be releasing a second production run at some point in the future. These will be different versions to those released in this tranche, so prepare to see those that were released in BR Blue with a tops number perhaps turn up in their two-tone green D number guise, and vice versa. These models are worth every penny. And finally, I've scratched that 20+ year itch where I felt there was something not quite right about my model of Nimbus. Well, this isn't a model of Nimbus, but it scratched that itch, and here I finally have a Deltic I truly am happy with. Well, I hope you found today's video really informative, and I'd love to know what you thought about the Accurascale Deltic. Is it truly the definitive 00 Deltic model? Please leave your comments in the comments section down below, and I do read every single one. And normally at this point I'd be saying about a link in the description box to help you out to find your own, but truly this has been one of the best selling models that I've seen in recent years, and I can't at the moment find any shop that still has any in stock. So again, if you know of a shop that still has any Accurascale Deltics in stock, help another modeler out and just leave a comment down below. And of course, if you're looking for a Deltic, have a scan through the comments and maybe there might be somebody who can help you out there and point you to a model shop that still has what you want in stock. And of course, Accurascale are going to be doing another production run of these with slightly different livery identity options. So it's something that if you missed out this time round, you can always get one then, although it is worth pre-ordering, as has been shown by how quickly these have sold out. Don't forget as well that we do have a link down below for the Monday Club exclusive wagon. This is the William Loud & Sons PAL brick from KR Models, and you can order this with confidence through Rails of Sheffield. The previous Monday Club wagons have proved extremely popular and have sold out quickly, so order yours and secure it today. And also don't forget that you can head on over to Patreon and help us to keep making the videos that you want to see. With multiple tiers of rewards, there's something for everybody, and you too could get your name in the credits at the end. But until next time, please like, share and subscribe. And this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying take great care of yourself. Happy modelling. Bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Support also comes from TMC, the Model Centre. Check out their comprehensive and fully stocked website at themodelcentre.com. For project ideas, why not look at their airbrush offers at the link in the description and have a go at creating your own weathering and graffiti masterpieces. It couldn't be simpler. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, Alan Dickerson, Eddie Popper, Karen Nichol, Medwin Williams, Crossways Point Junction, 3B Rail, and Jennifer Garrett. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.